On today's episode of The Franchise, today is Monday, January 9th, 2023. In today's episode, we're going to recap NFL Week 18, the final week of the NFL regular season. This week had a lot of big games to be played as teams vying for the one seed in their conference or to barely sneak in and clinch a playoff spot. We're going to go through all of those games, and we're also going to go and talk about the NFL playoff bracket, Super Wildcard Weekend. And I'm going to give my picks for who I think is going to win each round, each game, and ultimately make it and win the Super Bowl later on in February. And then we're going to talk about the national title game in college football that's going to be played later today on Monday in Los Angeles between TCU and Georgia. Going to give my pick as well as some other thoughts on this national title game. And then that's really going to be it for this episode. Because before we get into it, I would like to mention that The Franchise is now going to be a daily Monday through Friday podcast. Every single Monday through Friday morning, you're going to be able to get a new episode of The Franchise available on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. We're also going to be more active. On TikTok and Instagram. Both of those will be linked in the bio of either the podcast episode on Spotify or Apple, or it'll be in the description if you're watching along on YouTube. You can also start watching along on Spotify. Going to enable the feature to have video on Spotify. So like I said, Monday through Friday, every morning you'll have a new episode of The Franchise out as we try to conquer 2023. And like I said, the podcast is available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Let's get into it. NFL Week 18, the final week of the regular season. This is the last week of football that we have. I mean, it's not the last week of football. We have the entire NFL postseason. But the football time period is coming to an end. You know, we have one more college football game, and then we have a few more NFL playoff games, and then we're going to be out of football. But for now, we're going to go recap NFL Week 18. This was a big week. I mean, a lot of these games were meaningful. Some teams were vying to barely make the playoffs and be that 7th seed in their conference, and some of these teams were vying for the number 1 overall seed and that first round bye in the NFL playoffs. But we're going to go through, and we're going to start with Saturday's slate of games. We're going to go through all of these games first, give a quick recap, and then we'll go in and talk about the postseason and the playoff bracket. But beginning on Saturday, we had the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Raiders in a divisional matchup. All of these matchups are divisional games, which is great to see. The Chiefs ended up winning this game 31-13. They improved to 14-3 on the season, and they clinched the number 1 overall seed in the AFC. A few weeks ago, we haven't done the podcast in a few weeks, so there's a lot of stuff that we kind of missed and didn't talk about. But Jarrett Stidham started this game for the Raiders. Derek Carr looks to be on his way out for the Raiders, which is sad to see. As a Raiders fan, there's a Raiders hat somewhere back here if you're watching along. It is sad to see. I think Derek Carr is very underappreciated. I think he's very underrated as a quarterback. He's not a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. Someday down the future, we'll have to release our top 10 at each position in the NFL, but I think Derek Carr is a very underappreciated and underrated quarterback, and he's given a lot to this Raiders organization. And ultimately, it looks like he has played his final games with the Raiders this season. So Jarrett Stidham comes in, nice little tryout. He probably won't be the quarterback next season for the Raiders. And, rumors are going to start swirling around who the next Raiders quarterback is going to be. And it's already started with Tom Brady. He's going to be a free agent after the end of the season. We'll see if he wants to continue to play football, if he's going to retire, or if he's going to take his talents somewhere else from Tampa. Because I think the belief is, if Tom Brady is playing football next season, it's not with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, regardless of what they do in the playoff run. I think even if they win a Super Bowl, he retires. And if they lose, he could still very much retire. But if they lose, and he wants to keep playing, I don't expect that to be in Tampa. And the Raiders are a possibility. They have Devontae Adams. a potential return for Josh Jacobs. He will be a free agent. I don't think it's smart to pay a running back any money, regardless of how good Josh Jacobs was last season. You saw what the Cowboys did to Ezekiel Elliott, paying him, paying Dalvin Cook, paying Aaron Jones, paying a lot of these top running backs. At some point, it doesn't. At some point, the contract looks bad for you. But in terms of this game, it was a blowout. The Chiefs are going to be one of the Super Bowl contenders in the postseason. Moving on though to the next game, this was AFC South win, and you're in for these two teams between the Titans and the Jaguars. Whoever wins this game is in the playoffs, clinching a home playoff game, winning the AFC South. Jags pick up the win against the Titans, 20-16, and what a turnaround season it is. It's been for the Jaguars. Last season had the worst record in the NFL. Disaster season. Urban Meyer at head coach. Trevor Lawrence had a crap ton of interceptions. He just didn't have a good rookie season. But this year, turning it around, Doug Peterson comes in as head coach. And the Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence, and this team turning around. And they played great this season. 9-8 on the year, 5-3 in their division. 5-3 at home, not 5-3 in their division. But this is going to be interesting to see the Jaguars in the playoffs, as we'll see when we go through the bracket. They're a team that can definitely win a playoff game. I think, especially in their first round matchup against the Chargers, it is a real possibility that you see the Jaguars taking down a team like the Chargers and advancing to the next round of the playoffs. I think with Trevor Lawrence, with Christian Kirk, with Evan Ingram, and then some of the guys that they have on that defense, and Doug Peterson as a head coach, I think this is a breakout time for Trevor Lawrence where he can cement himself as one of the future young stars in the NFL. And then moving on, we have a lot of games on Sunday. Every other team played on Sunday. We're just going to run through some of these quicker than the others. The Buccaneers rested a lot of their starters in this game against the Falcons, as this game had no implications for them. They already clinched their division. They can't do anything in terms of seeding, so no one really played for them. Falcons won this game 30-17. We saw Desmond Ridder play 224 and 2 touchdowns for him. Patriots. Bills pick up a win 35-23. What a day for Nyheim Hines. 2 kick return touchdowns. 1 to start up to open first play of the game. Kick return for a touchdown by Nyheim Hines. I guess that's just a miracle because what happened to Damar Hamlin earlier in the week on Monday Night Football against the Bengals, getting put into cardiac arrest in the game. Very scary thing to see. Very fortunate that he is doing better and doing well. But the Bills pick up a win, 35-23 against the Patriots. Patriots were one of the teams vying for that last playoff spot in the AFC, and they ultimately get kicked out. Vikings-Bears. Vikings win this game 29-13. The Bears clinched the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft. For a majority of the year, it was the Houston Texans that were going to get this number 1 overall pick. But the Texans ended up winning their game on Sunday. And with that Bears loss, the Bears now have the number 1 overall pick. And this is going to be interesting. Chicago is not a team that you are going to expect to draft a quarterback. They have Justin Fields, and I think they're going to build around him and to be smart to do so. So with a quarterback draft class where you have C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young at the top, the Bears are in a prime position to get a huge haul for that number 1 overall pick if they decide to trade back, which they very well should do. It'd be the smart decision to trade back and get a huge haul. You just think a few years ago, the Niners traded up with the Dolphins to get Trey Lance, and the Dolphins got 3 first-round picks. So if you're the Bears, you're looking at 3 first-round picks for a team to get that number 1 overall pick. And I think, someone's going to do that. There's going to be a team in the draft that wants either C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young as their quarterback, and they're going to make that trade. They're going to jump up to number 1 overall, and the Bears are going to get a nice haul. They are going to have the most cap space in the offseason. So I think next year, the Bears are going to be a team that you can look at and say, dang, they have a pretty solid roster. And they might be able to win. Let's see, they won 3 games this year. They might be able to win 5-6 games next year, depending on the moves they make in the offseason. But they really have the opportunity to set themselves up for their future in a tremendously huge way by getting that number 1 overall pick. Bengals and Ravens, Week 18 matchup. Bengals pull off the dub 27-16. Lamar Jackson didn't play in this game, but the Ravens better hope that he plays next week, because these two teams play again next week, first round of the playoffs at home in Cincinnati. We'll see if Lamar plays. If Lamar plays, I think, when we'll get to the predictions in a little bit, but if Lamar's playing, Cincinnati is going to have a little bit more of a tough time against this Ravens team, who they've smacked around so far this season. Texans beat the Colts, like I said earlier, and then the Dolphins pick up a win against the Jets. The Dolphins ended up clinching that last playoff spot in the AFC. Any other games here? These were the 2 games that were really the most important ones of the entire weekend. Seahawks, Rams, and Lions, Packers. The Seahawks-Rams game was played first. The Seahawks win, they have a chance of making the playoffs, and if they lose, they're out. They pull off the win in overtime, 19-16. So the Seahawks, 9-8. All they need to do is hope that the Lions beat the Packers and they're in the playoffs. And when it comes to the Lions-Packers game, if the Seahawks lost, then the Lions-Packers was a win and you're in. Whichever team won would be in the playoffs. Ultimately, Seattle wins, so the Lions are eliminated. So, the thought was going to be the Lions are going to lose this game, get a better draft pick. They have nothing to play for, and the Packers will make the playoffs. But that did not happen. The Packers lose the game 20-16. The Lions pick up a win. Packers eliminated from the playoffs, and the Seahawks have made the postseason. Detroit, it'd be awesome to see them in the playoffs. I think they would be a nice team. I think they would have got smacked around in the first round against the 49ers if they made the playoffs. But the Lions are just a really awesome team. I think Jared Goff is there's no need for the Lions to draft a quarterback. I think Jared Goff can be their guy. And if he's not their guy, Caleb Williams is available in next year's draft. So there's no need for the Lions to draft a quarterback. They have some great pieces on that offense. All they need to do, address the defense. I think next year the Lions will be in this same spot, this same position next season. But let's get to this playoff bracket because this is really where it gets pretty fun. NFL playoffs are set. This is what we've been waiting all year for. Let me just pull it up right here. All right, so we're gonna go through the first round, and I'm gonna pick every single game for every single round until we get to the Super Bowl, and then we'll pick our winner there as well. Beginning in the AFC, we're gonna have the Bills taking on the Dolphins in Buffalo. I think this game's a very easy game to pick. Will Tua even play? He's had like 4 concussions on the season. Didn't play in Week 18. And Buffalo, I know Miami got that win early on in the season against the Bills down in Miami. But the Bills and the Dolphins are the Dolphins are a different team now than they were then. The Dolphins were amazing earlier in the season. And they've really struggled since that game. Or not since that game, but they've struggled in their most recent weeks. And the Bills are one of the most dominant teams in the NFL. So I think when you're looking at this matchup in Buffalo, home playoff game for Josh Allen, I think you're looking at a very easy Bills win. For the Ravens and the Bengals, if Lamar Jackson's playing, there's a really good possibility that the Ravens can win this football game. But I like the Bengals. I think the Bengals are probably a top 3 team in the NFL right now. I think all around, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Joe Mixon, Tyler Boyd, and T. Higgins, it's an amazing offensive group, and that defense is tremendous as well. So I'm going to take the Bengals over the Ravens in that first round. And then finally, we have the Chargers taking on the Jaguars in Jacksonville. I'm gonna take an upset. I'm going to take the Jaguars over the Chargers. just in this last game for the Chargers, they just lost Mike Williams and Joey Bosa to injuries. So we'll see if they end up playing against the Jaguars in this first round. Herbert is a better player. I think he's a top 4 quarterback in the league compared to Trevor Lawrence. But I don't like Brandon Staley as a head coach. I think some of the decisions he makes as a play caller, as a game manager, are questionable. And Doug Peterson's been there as a head coach. He's a Super Bowl winning coach. And I like the Jaguars. These two teams played early on in the season, and the Jaguars stomped the Chargers. So I'm going to take the Jaguars. And then over on the NFC side of things, Seattle versus the 49ers. I mean, this is a really easy San Francisco pick. They have the best defense in the entire league. And that offense, even though it is with Brock Purdy's been balling out since he's been in there at the starter position. And with Christian McCaffrey, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, and George Kittle, I mean, San Francisco's in a really good position to go have a really, really deep playoff run. And then the Giants and Vikings, I've been saying this all season long on the podcast. I think the Giants are frauds. I don't think they will win a single playoff game. Especially, I was saying this a lot earlier in the season when the Giants were like a undefeated and then a 1-loss and a 2-loss team. And then they showed later on in the season, I guess they showed their true colors, losing a lot of games and just not performing well at all. But the Giants, I think they're frauds. I don't think they win a playoff game. And I think that it stays true with the Vikings. I think they're easily going to beat them. Minnesota's offense is electric, one of the best offenses in the league, regardless to the fact that the Vikings defense, their pass defense is horrible. I think when you're playing a team like the Giants, who, Daniel Jones doesn't have the best receiving weapons, the Giants are more of a run team, right? And I know in the playoffs that's very important, but the Giants are frauds and they won't win a playoff game. And then finally, Cowboys and Buccaneers. All season long, and especially when I started doing the power rankings on the weekly, I had the Cowboys as a top 5 team in the game. I thought they were a team that could really go out there and win a Super Bowl. And I still think they have the potential to do that. I think their defense is caliber, is Super Bowl caliber. I think, Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Ezekiel Elliott, Tony Pollard, those are some nice pieces on that offense. But at the same time, Dak Prescott has not been playing good. This season, he's thrown a pick in basically every single game that he's played. And I think if the Cowboys are to lose, it's going to be because of Dak. I don't think it's their defense. I think it'll be because Dak makes some mistakes. And yeah, I'm going to take Tampa. I'm going to take Tampa Bay, Tom Brady. I know the Cowboys had a better record all year, but they're playing on the road, taking on Tom Brady at home in Tampa Bay. I just can't pick against Tom Brady, especially. I know they haven't had the best regular season. They weren't one of the better teams in the league. They finished 8-9 on the year. But I'm gonna take Tom Brady and the Buccaneers over the Cowboys. So we're looking here at the second round of the playoffs, and we're gonna be having the Bills and Bengals, and then the Jaguars and Chiefs. Bills-Bengals, rematch of the Monday Night Football game from earlier on in the week. I'm going to take the Bengals. I know the Bills, Josh Allen, probably the second best quarterback in the league. Stephon Diggs, one of the best receivers in the game. And the Bills have been that team all year, even from the beginning of the season. A team that could have gone on there and won and win the Super Bowl. I think the Bengals are a better team. I think Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, two of my favorite players in the game. With that receiving core in Cincinnati is insane. All right, Higgins, Boyd, and Chase. It's a 3-headed monster right there. Any 3 of those guys can have an amazing game with Pirine and Mixon in the backfield. I like Cincinnati on the road against the Buffalo Bills. And then the Jaguars and Chiefs. Jacksonville had a great season, but the Chiefs are probably the best team in football. So easy win for the Chiefs, and then we'll have an AFC championship against the Chiefs and the Cincinnati Bengals. But first, second round of the NFC playoffs. We got San Francisco taking on Minnesota, and we'll have Philadelphia taking on the Buccaneers. I'm gonna take the Eagles over Tampa Bay. I think Jalen Hurts. The Eagles are just a really, really good football team, and I think with that first round bye to get Jalen Hurts more healthy and some of the other guys on that roster for the Eagles more healthy, it's only gonna help them. And Tom Brady and that Buccaneers team have had a lot of struggles the entire year. So I think that's where their season's gonna end, and that might be the last time we ever see Tom Brady play the game of football. And then the Niners and the Vikings. This is an interesting one. But I'm going to take the Niners. I think their defense is just so good. When you have a defense that is the best pass, best rush, best run, just overall the fastest, strongest, and just best defense in the game, I think, especially in the postseason, you have a really, really good shot at having a really deep playoff run. So I'll take the Niners over the Vikings. Then we'll have a San Francisco-Philadelphia NFC Championship. I think this is where it's going to come down to the quarterback play. And I'm going to take Jalen Hurts, a guy who will probably finish second in NFL MVP voting, over Brock Purdy. I know I just said the Niners' defense is incredible, but I think at the end of the day, the Eagles will end up winning against the 49ers. A.J. Brown is poised to go off at any moment. Devontae Smith, same thing for him. With one of the best offensive lines in the game for Philadelphia. And they have a great defense too. Don't let the Niners defense overshadow what Philadelphia has on their defensive end, on their defensive side of the ball. So I have the Eagles in the Super Bowl, and then we have a Chiefs-Bengals AFC Championship. I'm gonna take Cincinnati. I think they are I think they're the best team in the game. I really do. I think Cincinnati is the best team in the NFL. So ultimately, Cincinnati versus Eagles. I'm taking the Bengals to win the Super Bowl. They'll make back-to-back Super Bowls. That's my pick, and I think they'll finally get it done with a win over the Eagles in Arizona in the Super Bowl. Joe Burrow or Jamar Chase, Super Bowl MVP. So that is the playoff bracket, and that's who I think is going to go through. And I think those are my picks. I think the Bengals, Eagles, Super Bowl. I think when you look at these teams, beside of what I just said, the contenders are probably the Bills, Bengals, and Chiefs, and then the Niners and the Eagles. Those are the teams that are going to, one of those 5 teams will win the Super Bowl, and 2 of those 5 will be in the Super Bowl. I think the AFC is a lot stronger than the NFC. But yeah, I think the Bengals will win the Super Bowl over the Eagles. So those are the playoff picks. We'll see how it goes this weekend. And then before we end off the episode, TCU versus Georgia National Championship later tonight on Monday in Los Angeles. TCU, what a story it's been for them. They're ranked number 3 right now in the national title. But you look before the season even began, they weren't even a ranked team. They weren't supposed to be good. They were bad last year in the Big 12. And this year, fighting for a national championship. On the other side, Georgia, ranked number 1 at the beginning of the season, won the national title last year, and have probably the best defense in college football, an electric offense, and a Heisman finalist at quarterback. Who's going to end up winning this game? I know TCU took Michigan. They handed it to Michigan. And, I thought it was going to go the other way. I thought Michigan was about to smack TCU right in the mouth and say, "You guys had a good year, but you're not us. You're not the Big Ten schools. You're not one of these top dogs in college football." But TCU proved them wrong. TCU, Georgia. Who wins this matchup? It's tough. I'm really thinking about it on the fly right now. I didn't prepare this at all. I think it's got to be Georgia. I love TCU. I love Max Duggan. I love TCU's uniforms. What they were wearing against Michigan, those all whites, that white helmet. Man, TCU was drippy. But I mean, Georgia is the cream of the crop in college football right now. They're the program. And that team, that defense, that offense, Kirby Smart, Georgia will win the national title on Monday night against TCU. So I guess we'll see what happens. I mean, we'll talk about this on Tuesday in tomorrow's episode. I guess we'll see what happens. But that will do it for today's episode. I'm assuming my guess is that these episodes, since it's going to be 5 days a week, they're going to be a lot shorter. I'd say 30 minutes. This one's about 25. But I mean, yeah, we'll be back tomorrow. We'll recap the national title game between these two schools. Probably talk some hoops, and definitely some baseball will be talked about at some point this week. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to today's episode. Available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Go check the description for the Instagram, TikTok, and all the other platforms. Subscribe, share, follow, notifications on. We'll see you guys on Tuesday.